Hey everybody, thanks for showing up for this Southern waterfowling class. We're going to give it a few minutes, allow people to show up before we start picking these two guys' brains about all this knowledge and wisdom they have to drop on us about duck hunting and goose hunting in the South. We'll go over a few things first. So your cameras are off and you're muted, so no one can hear you, see you. Don't worry anything about that. If you have questions, drop it in the Q&A box. The chat is also open as well. You can go back and forth however much you want to in there, but if you have a direct question that you want to ask, it's better that you go to the Q&A for that. We'll also be doing a giveaway towards the end of this. The link to that will be posted in that same Q&A box, so keep an eye out for that. And also, if you hear these guys talk about anything that you want to go back and listen to, and you're like, man, I wish I could go back and listen to that again, don't worry. This will be all this whole webinar will be posted to our YouTube channel tomorrow, the onX YouTube channel. So other than that, we'll give it, I don't know, 2 to 3 more minutes. So let's do this. Spence, where are you right now? I think you're on mute still. Yeah, you're on mute still. You're good.
Sorry about that. I was in the middle of elaborating upon, I'm in an undisclosed location. I've signed an NDA. I'm north of the 139th parallel, which is, for those of you that didn't pay attention in geography class, that's the Canadian border with the United States. So we're north of the border right now.
Yeah. Good. Brooks, well, I know where you're at, but you can tell everyone else where you're at.
I'm in West Point at the Mossy Oak HQ headquarters. Glad to be south of the border. I'm not big on Canada, to be honest.
You would be big what we did today, Brooks.
I know. I'm jealous for sure. That's why I'm jaded and jealous.
Well, let's do this before we've got enough people in here now. We can dive into the conversation. A lot of the folks that are on this probably know who y'all are already, so I'm not asking for your whole life story, but just real quick, we can start out with Spencer. Just give us just kind of a quick rundown of your background and what you do and your involvement in waterfowl. And Brooks, you can go after him, and then after that, we'll start talking ducks.
Sure. My name is Spence Halford. I live in Somerville, Tennessee. It's about an hour east of Memphis. I make duck calls and turkey calls for a living. My company's called Rolling Thunder Game Calls, and we manufacture the widgets that we sell. We sell to the big box stores and any of the private dealers that'll take our stuff and hang it on their pegs. But so duck hunting and turkey hunting and killing critters with devices that make the same sounds they make is how we make a living.
Heard that. Brooks?
Yep, Brooks Tinsley, West Point, Mississippi, home of Mossy Oak. Dad works for Mossy Oak, so I bleed the camouflage. But on top of that, I'm an avid waterfowler, ducks, turkey, and deer in that order. Like Spence says, I wouldn't ever want to have to pick one, ducks and turkey. I wouldn't have to want to make a choice. But I hunted public land for 20 years, and about 4 years ago, bought a piece of property and haven't done a whole lot of public land since then, but still got a plethora of knowledge and, use onX's products and, ready to talk how to kill ducks.
Gotcha. Well, look, let's go right into this. So the whole topic of this masterclass is about the topic is Southern waterfowling. However, y'all know you don't really hear waterfowling a lot down here. People either say that you're duck hunting or you're goose hunting, but so we're kind of sitting, it's interesting that, the timing of this masterclass, because we're kind of sitting on the precipice of everything. Like everything's about to be open down here. And so we'll start out topic wise with probably one of the most asked questions. It's about locating ducks. Like that's the big thing right now, right? Is everyone's trying to figure out where they're going to hunt on opening day, carrying out through the year. And obviously, not asking y'all to give any spots away per se, that would be sacrilegious, but from the two of y'all, like if y'all are hunting a spot that y'all have hunted years, if you're going to a spot that you've never been to before, what are some of the things that y'all do to locate a hunting area?
I just hope I get invited to hunt with Brooks most of the time. That's my typical play. But man, honestly, this time of year, ducks, they call them waterfowl for a reason. You know, they go to where water is, and some years are wetter than others, but every year this time in November, it seems like there's not enough water. And so in the early season, you know, I'm looking for where water is, and both historically where water is, like trapped water, as well as where water drains and sloughs and things like that. So that when you get just a little bit of rain, you want to know where it pools up, kind of thing. And so if you're not dealing with the flood, you're looking for low spots. And so for me, I mean, onX is very effective, both from marking the traditional sloughs and the low spots, but also looking at learning how to read topo maps. I mean, there's not a lot of lines in bottomland timber, you know, on a topo map, but the sloughs will be there if you learn how to read one. And so that'd be, I don't know if that's exactly what you were asking, but I'm looking for water and where water is.
Right. No, that was absolutely what I was asking. I like that you brought the topo part up, because there was a friend of mine that has been duck hunting longer than I have and is better at duck hunting than I am. And he was talking about using topo maps to waterfowl hunt. And I had never even thought of that. You know, I mean, I was like, I use topo maps when I turkey hunt, but like, I just never really put the two together. So I would say for me, yeah, using the topo maps on the onX that's one huge way that I scout personally. Brooks, do you have any particular things that you do, you know, leading up to the season as far as locating ducks or locating a spot to hunt?
Yeah, you know, so we're, like you said, we're coming up on duck season this year. Like Spencer said, you know, water is normally an issue to start the season. November is historically your driest month of the year, but this year leading up to November, it's been as dry as it's ever been. So water is a premium, and everybody I know on private land that has water has ducks, even in areas that they may not necessarily have had ducks in the past. So as far as public land goes, like Spence said, like sloughs, deeper areas are where you're going to have huntable habitat. So like the topo maps, and you can even look at aerial images and typically pick out where the sloughs would be. A lot of time in sloughs, you've got cypress trees. They won't shed their leaves like some oak trees will. So a lot of times those deeper areas you can see better on a map, and it'd be good to focus on the different tree colors there.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes they look like deadenings too. You know, they're thinner than thick canopy, places where water wants to pool up, and you'll have spots that beavers, you know, the beavers are the best engineers in the woods, but you'll have the beavers will create a levee or a dam, you know, and then they'll hold water in a place, and you can, like Brooke said, you can see that on the aerial image a lot clearer than you can see dense, mature, dry hardwood forest.
Mm-hmm. So both of y'all are well versed in hunting very pressured ducks, hunting public land. If you're trying to pick, you know, or determine what you're going to do on the opener, are you putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, as you're like, we're hunting this spot right here? Or do you kind of have a couple of spots picked out? So if you get, I guess, beat to one spot or one spot doesn't work out, how do you go about doing that?
You can't get beat on opening day. No, but I mean, like you said it best. I mean, like you really have to have alternate plans, you know. So when I'm looking at maps, trying to plan my opening day out, I'm like, I'm making my plan, and I have no plans on getting beat to this hole now, but stuff goes wrong.
Right.
And, you know, you've got to have plan B and C. And sometimes your plan A revolves around those alternate plans. Mm-hmm. Like I wouldn't go, if you say we're going to hunt this hole, but there's no other holes, if we don't get it, we're done. Yeah. So I would maybe pick a spot to where, well, if we get beat here, we can for sure get this other one and still, you know, have a good hunt. So, you know, that's kind of how I would approach it.
I'm totally with Brooks. I don't like getting beat on day 60 or day 1. And honestly, a lot of times that makes me hunt places that are not quite on the X, just because I so badly don't like to get beat. So I try not to hunt places that I think I'm going to get beat to. And so from an onX standpoint, I try to pay attention to how I'm going to get in and out of somewhere, and what my plan B and my plan C would be if I get beat to plan A. But if I know where I think the ducks are going to want to be, then I don't always try to go right where those ducks are. And so I will try my best when I'm scouting early season to not only know where the ducks want to be, but know where they're coming from, because I'd just as soon be underneath where they're going to be flying, like under the flight line, as I would be right there on the X, because there's a real good chance every other red-blooded male that wears bottomland camo and has a Benelli shotgun is going to be where those ducks want to be. It's very rare on public that I'm the only one that knows something. So I try to drop pins, when I know where stuff is, whether it's sitting on a field or whether they're sitting in the woods, and then connect lines so that I can try to establish, flight patterns, just in the same way that you would hunt a deer, between food and bedding area. You try to find his trails. Ducks fly the same flight lines. And so, if you get beat, you at least want to know where that flight line is so you can stay underneath it and, work to your advantage.
Yeah. So you're pretty much, you're determining trajectory. Like you're finding out they're coming from here to here. So at some point you can intercept them. Am I understanding that correctly?
100%. When everybody does a little different, but most of the time when I'm hunting in public woods, I'm hunting flight lines more than I'm hunting what most waterfowlers would call an X. In a field setting or in a place where ducks are feeding, like where we're at in Canada, we're trying to hunt an X. We're trying to hunt where every bird naturally wants to go on his own. And we're watching that from way off. But in a place where there's 20,000 acres of woods and there's 500 other hunters, that X goes out the window real quick, because everybody's shooting and everybody's calling, and there's 100 dogs running around. It's just chaos. And so when I'm hunting in the woods, I'm trying to be underneath a flight line, and I'm trying to be in a place that sets up for the wind correctly for those ducks. That's really kind of the two objectives.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that a lot. We had a couple of submitted questions. I'm going to try to break those up throughout this thing instead of dumping them all on y'all at once. And so I'm going to go to the first one now. The first one that's user submitted, and Brooks, Spence, y'all can answer this in order however y'all want. When it comes to decoys, what's the most important part? Amount of decoys, shape or orientation of the spread, motion? I know that's a very loaded question, so just go with that as you will.
Me and Spencer both smiling because we know the answer.
Yeah,
it's motion, 100%.
Yeah, for sure.
Like how many decoys you put out, whether it's 3 dozen or 8 dozen, I feel like, based on what I've seen, regardless of the terrain, whether you're in timber, fields, whatever, fields may be a little bit different, but motion is critical. So you want stuff moving the water, you want ripples on the water, and that gives you so much more visibility than you can even really wrap your head around as far as a decoy spread goes.
Yeah. When ducks are sitting on water, or when geese are in a field, they're never sitting still. They're always moving, stretching, splashing. When ducks are happy in the woods, they're making more racket than you and your best 12 friends. They're splashing water like crazy. And so I agree with Brooks. Motion is definitely most important. If you're in a field, a flag is the most important thing. It's like motion's definitely a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. How much, like, I guess, Spence, I can lean on you for this one, like, especially in the early season, like how much do your calling tactics change from the beginning, like opening day, to the end of the season? How much are your calling tactics changing? Like, are you kind of go with the same arsenal from day 1 to day 60, or are you changing it up as it goes along?
That's a good question. I mean, by and large, I would say early in the season, you're pouring all the gas to them that you possibly can. I mean, everybody that's got a duck call in the woods anyways, ought to be blowing that duck call as loud as they possibly can, because early in the season, when the leaves are on the trees, the ducks, what they're hearing is at a premium versus what they're seeing. Later in the season, leaves are falling off the trees, they can see a lot. And so hitting them at the right times and like not overcalling kind of becomes at a premium. So, I mean, I would say by and large, early in the season, I'm calling a lot. I'm calling really aggressive. When I get a hold of a duck, I'm trying to get him finished as fast as I possibly can. And later in the season, I'm trying to be a little more gentle and not overcall, because he can see a lot more.
Yeah. While we're on that, because you brought up something interesting there, and then we had a question related to this as well. There is even, among Southern duck hunters, there's not everyone gets a chance to hunt in the timber. And so someone that's only hunted in moist soil or open water settings, and you hear someone say that the calling style or how ducks react to calls on open water versus timber, it's a very different thing. And so either of y'all two kind of explain the difference there, because I like personally, I didn't hunt in any timber growing up until later on, and I didn't understand it. So it's a different animal. So if y'all could explain that a little bit.
Most of your timber hunting, you're hunting traffic. You might find a big raft of ducks later in the year that are really using a block of woods. So if you are hunting traffic ducks, you're hunting ducks that aren't necessarily coming to that hole day in and day out. You've scouted them and they're coming. So you've either got ducks that are coming to you or ducks that you're enticing to come. A lot of times, if you were hunting a moist soil or a field setting, it's like, man, these ducks have been really hitting this flooded cornfield. Well, they're coming. So you're calling to give them confidence that, hey, this is legit. And if you're hunting, all of your public land gets hunted day in and day out. So those ducks aren't necessarily using those spots. So you're really having to kind of beg and plead them to come. That's where a good duck call can be the difference in a good hunt and a terrible hunt.
Yeah, for sure. I try to break it down in my mind, very similar to what Brooks said, but more along the lines of what's visual to the duck. Like in the woods, the duck has obscured vision. He can't see everything, right? So he's listening more. Whereas in an open water setting, even whether it's like a big open tupelo or cypress break or a field, if he can see everything, then he's going to be more responsive to what he can see, more motion, more decoys, better hide, all those things. And so I try to kind of craft my calling around what the duck can see. Like this afternoon, we hunted in a cornfield. The ducks could see our spread from 3 miles away. So I wasn't standing on my call like I will next Saturday morning when the ducks can't see me or my decoys. I'm going to blow my guts out, until it's time to pull the trigger. Mm-hmm. So if the ducks can see my spread, when they can react visually to it, I would say I'm trying to not screw it up with my call. If the ducks can't see my spread, then I'm trying to call until I screw it up.
Gotcha.
That's how I would kind of split it up.
It makes complete sense, because I vividly remember the first time I hunted ducks in the timber and I saw the difference, as far as, because every other setting I had been in, kind of like you were saying, Spence, it's like all the ducks I'd hunted previously, they saw where we were at, our spread, before they heard us. Whereas to watching ducks and they're in the trees, you could actually see those ducks react to those calls a lot more intensely, and you see them look. It's a completely different style of hunt.
That's right.
So we also got, this is a live question from Philip Thompson. This is going back to Spence, what you were talking about flight paths. So he says, first year hunting, what is the best approach when lining myself up to a flight path? Meaning face the wind, back to the wind, water to the right, to the left, etc. Asking about this, matching himself up to flight paths.
Well, so, there's the interesting thing about nature is that if you'll let her teach you, she will. And so I would say one of the things that onX is the most effective for is that when I notice things and it may not be something that affects tomorrow's hunts, but if I notice something like where a whole bunch of ducks are sitting in a private field or where they're sitting on a refuge or something, I try to drop a pin there so that if I'm somewhere else and I notice something else, I can kind of connect those dots. And so like, I'm not going to walk in the woods tomorrow morning to scout and learn everything I need to learn, but over 20 years, you start to see patterns. You start to see that when water level is at a certain height in a certain river, ducks fly this flight line. When the water gets to this height, seems like they go this flight line. And sometimes that just boils down to like, okay, today I hear the shooting over there a long ways, and then starting to think what changed from yesterday to today. Well, the river jumped 2 feet, or the wind is blowing a different direction. But like trying to assimilate that information and learn from it is really kind of where you're going to see. Sometimes you can just visually sit in a parking lot and you can see a flight line that's going back and forth and back and forth. Great, get underneath that flight line, blow your duck call, kill them. But sometimes it's not that obvious. And it just takes extrapolating information that you learn over many years. And so that's where like the tools of being able to drop a pin and take a note about what you saw and what your observation was, whether it's water level, temperature, time of year, all that kind of stuff. Over time, that builds up into, a bank of data that's really valuable, because the ducks tend to do the same things over and over.
Yeah. I think kind of like what you're saying is it's, and we've gone over, or I've said this a lot. It's like for this guy talking about, it's his first, he's new to duck hunting. He's trying to figure it out, doing things like attending, like being in this master class, watching YouTube videos, absorbing all the information you can is great for sure. The best thing you can do is go out there and do it. Like you said, you can't learn from nature if you're not out in it. So you just got to go out and try it.
Yeah, and honestly, on public land, probably the best thing you can do is go and be on time and be polite to people that you run into. I mean, Brooks and I knew each other for a long time from a distance, but the way we really honestly got to be really good friends is we were both racing on foot to the same spot, and we saw each other and we're like, all right, well, let's just hunt together. And I mean, we've been great friends since. We knew each other from a distance since then, but I've learned a ton from Brooks and all the guys in his group. And I'm certain that a few of his guys would say the same thing about a few of the knuckleheads that I run around. So like learning from other people, you can't put a value on that. I mean, so being polite in the woods and just showing up on time, man, that'll go a long way towards learning, where those flight lines are and where you need to be.
Yeah. Being polite, you could apply that to a lot of things throughout life, but being polite is something that you don't often hear when talking about public land duck hunting, but it's probably a good idea.
I'm preaching to myself too while we're at it. I'm not saying that.
Well, the flight line stuff, like Spence said, conditions change all the time, not only from year to year, but day to day in a duck hunting setting. You have a big 4-inch rain and puts water everywhere. All of a sudden the ducks are spread out, and they were all on this one rice field and trading back and forth from it, but now they're everywhere. But he mentioned notes, and that's a big thing that, I did, when I'm running my GPS, when I'm running onX, I'm putting, all right, when the river was at this level and the conditions were this was a really good spot. And, past a lot of times predicts the future, and that gives you a good starting point. But if you don't have those starting points to go on, like Spencer said, there's a lot of friends to be had in the duck woods. But if you're a butthead, nobody want to hang out with you. And the most valuable thing I had when I was doing a lot of public land hunting was a lot of guys that were resources, a network of people that we weren't scared to share information with, because we knew this person isn't going to use this information to hurt anybody. But if you're not that kind of person from the get-go, then you're never going to develop a network. So go into it trying to make friends.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Another thing, so like talking about onX, both of y'all hit on, which I find interesting, both of y'all hit on taking notes and writing stuff down, water levels. It's like one of the things that I think is like really underutilized within the app is you can put notes within your waypoints. So like if you're somewhere, I mean, like you can go into a waypoint and you can write down the water level, you can write down whatever you want to, but you know, instead of having a journal in a separate place, you can keep all that stuff within the app. That's helped me tremendously because I'm not much of a journaler, but like that's why I said one of the things interesting that both y'all talked about taking notes. It's like everybody that I've met, it's like a high percentage of folks that are really good within their craft, albeit ducks, geese, turkeys, deer. So many of those guys, they're taking notes, they're writing stuff down, and they find that, like you said, history it repeats itself. Like it finds a way to repeat itself a lot. So taking notes pays dividends. So I find it interesting.
Every really good hunter or really good woodsman pays attention to those details, the wind direction, the water levels, the temperature. And it's not always just one of those factors. It's the combination of those factors. I mean, and I'm not nearly as good at it as some are, but it pays dividends. Keeping up with that in your notes, it really matters.
Well, the cool thing about onX, so I kept a journal for a while and have since lost that journal. Like I lose most of my stuff, but I still have people reach out to me and I'm like, man, I used to have some really good notes, but with onX now, you know, it's a cloud-based system. So it's there, you know, I don't have to worry about losing those notes and I can share them really easily. So yeah, I wish I had that at my disposal 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's helped me because like I wasn't much of a school student. And so like used to when I was younger, taking notes meant I had to physically like write something down, which I hated doing anyway. So being able to take notes within certain waypoints has been huge for me. Another thing that I do is like the color coding on there. Like that's helped me just on a time saver deal. Like if I'm scouting a spot, like I hadn't set foot on it, I'm just like dropping some waypoints on places I want to go look at. Like I have my own little color coding system. Like I'll drop the waypoint, I'll change it to the duck icon, and then I'll make the waypoint the white color. And if it's white, that means I haven't been there before. If I go there and it's good, I'll change it to blue. If I go there and it sucks, I'll either delete it or I'll turn it to like yellow. But that way, when I pull my map up, I don't have to click on like 8 different waypoints to find the one that I need. It just makes it happen a lot quicker, which I'm big on like maximizing my time, and the more waypoints I drop, the more pertinent it means for me to go and like customize all those. Otherwise I just start losing myself and try to figure out where's what. Going back to, we had another question asked that I wanted to hit on. Going back, I mean, y'all know this, decoys are always a topic for people to ask about. Does your decoy, I mean, we know motion, we know that, but does I guess your strategy with decoys change throughout the year? Like we talked about changing calling throughout the year, but how does your decoy situation change from opening day to later in the season?
Go ahead, Spence. Let you handle that.
I mean, sometimes decoys really depend on how you're getting there. I mean, that sounds dumb, but
no, it doesn't.
If you've got to walk a mile, you know, you're not carrying 7 dozen decoys. So I just don't put all my stock in decoys in the woods, but by and large, I learned from Brooks, and I'm not just blowing smoke. Like if the ducks get close and they're not doing it, I try to change something up. Like I try to adapt to what I'm watching them do. And it has not been a ton of times, but I can absolutely say there have been times in my hunting career where the ducks get close over the trees and they see those decoys and they bug out. And when it gets like that, I won't hunt with any decoys at all. I'll kick water and try to hunt tighter spots instead of big open holes. And so I don't really know how to explain when that happens necessarily. It's more of just a reaction. And I don't know if it's because of pressure. Probably mostly is pressure, because it seems like that's what critters respond to the most is pressure. And sometimes some years like this year will probably be one of those years where it's low water, and everywhere there's water, ducks getting shot at. It'll probably happen sooner than later. But, you know, when ducks don't react to the decoys, I'm picking them up, or I'm moving them, or I'm changing them, and I'm just trying to figure out what they want. So that's not a very specific answer, but
No, it's an honest answer, because like the whole, you know, sometimes it depends on where you're going or how. That's not a dumb answer. Like I 100% know
Yeah.
where you're coming from. And like the other thing, like going back to what I was saying earlier about a lot of the good hunters that I know, they take notes. All of the good duck hunters that I know, like, are always more than willing to move their decoys around if they think something's wrong. Because
Yeah.
I'm sure y'all too, like I've hunted with folks that like the decoys, they put them out and that's where they're going to be. Like there's no moving them around. And I've been in situations where it's driving me crazy. I want to go and move something because it's obvious that something isn't working.
yeah, it's tricky and it's hard, especially when you hunt with other people that are good hunters, because it's often that you'll have 4 or 5 guys that all have really good, strong opinions. And it's, I mean, it's like who's going to be the whole boss today, you know? But you know, I think keeping an open mind, that's probably the number one thing that I learned from hunting with Brooks, is keeping an open mind to try to change things until you get it figured out is worthwhile, because sometimes it really does make a big difference.
So I hunted most all of January without any mojo ducks. I'm on private land in the middle of the Mississippi River hunting very wild ducks, and we had a really good January. But then the last week of the season, for whatever reason, we just weren't doing much. And I'm no mojos, not a big spread, but just weren't getting the reactions. And the last day of the season, I put out mojos. And I mean, so they've been shot at for 120 days at this point over spinning wing decoys, and ducks were trying to get inside the spinning wing decoys. I mean, so every day is a little bit different. And like Spencer said, reading the ducks, there's a big difference. Like if I feel like I've got a duck committed to come in and it doesn't come in at the last second, I want to change something.
Right.
It saw something. It could have been people. It could have been a lot of factors. But if I feel like we've got a really good hide, they did not see us, but they didn't finish, then I'm changing something with a decoy spread.
And that's like literally what you're describing, Brooks, is bugging out. Like they're coming locked up. I mean, everybody's like about to click their safety off kind of thing. And then they kind of change direction. That's when you're wanting to change something.
Correct. Yep.
Worst feeling in the world. Darn near. When that happens, you're like, oh, there you go. Yeah, we've all been there. I've seen it. Y'all have seen it. Yeah. And
it crushes my soul when that happens.
Trust me when I say you don't want to be the one doing something wrong when that happens when you're out with Brooks.
But what Brooks was talking about, being a nice guy and being polite to everybody. But now you're changing your story up. What am I supposed to
We were talking about strangers.
That's pre-hunt stuff. During hunt, that all goes out the window.
Once you get in the hunt, all that goes out the window.
Yeah. We're not making friends.
You got a role to play. You play your role.
Yep.
Oh man. I like this question a lot. So this guy, he's basically, I'll just read the question straight off. It says, advice tips for the walk-in hunter. Doesn't have a boat. He's either on foot or on a kayak. I like that question because one, that was me when I was younger. I was jealous of my buddies that had access to boats and stuff. And so I know a lot of folks that they're like, man, if I don't have a boat and this, then I might as well not even go. Obviously, you know, having a boat can definitely help, but y'all's thoughts on someone that doesn't have access to boat, they just have access to their 2 feet or maybe a kayak. Like, what can they do to get themselves in the ball game?
I'm kind of like a think outside of the box type of guy when it comes to getting a hole. So there's holes to be had that you don't necessarily have to get a boat to. That's where onX would come into play. There's private land that butts up to a lot of public land. that you could ask permission to go through them to maybe access stuff on foot. There's a lot of WMAs and refuges that there's kind of walk-in only areas. So trying to find those spots, studying the regulations for particular areas and trying to figure out, where can I go that I don't have to have a boat? But at the same time, I would say the folks that don't have a boat, you're really limiting yourself to what's out there. Like you had mentioned, when you first started, when I was, getting going, I had a John boat with a trolling motor. When I was 22 years old, still in college, fresh out of college, I literally had a John boat with a trolling motor. So just kind of making the most out of what's at your disposal, whatever that may be. You don't have to. I talked to a guy the other day. He said on a very popular place, he used a kayak on the last day of the season and went out and shot a limit. And so it's out there, probably not opening day in Arkansas this year. But, with it being dry, there's going to be a lot of folks that are walking the holes.
Yeah. And my response would be similar to Brooks. But I would say a boat is probably the most important thing I have in my entire duck hunting repertoire. I've got right now in my house 4 boats, and they're all kind of for different things, and none of them are probably worth anything to anybody other than me. But I mean, I've got a boat that I want to put in when I want to hunt a big river, something that I want to be safe in. I've got a couple of boats that are just small John boats that, like Brooks said, were the only thing I could afford at the time. And it's easy to look on social media and, on the internet and think that you got to have a $20,000 rig, with tricked out carburetors and bored out this and that. And the truth of the matter is there's a lot of John boats out there that a guy can buy for $1,000 and put a trolling motor or a cheap motor on it. But a boat just allows you to get to some places that your feet just can't. There's no shame in walking in, because some of the best hunts I've ever had in my entire life were walk-in hunts. But I mean, I'll put it to you this way. If I've got to spend money on 2 things, it's going to be, my boat and probably the trailer underneath that boat. I mean, just because they're waterfowl, man. I mean, there's no way around it. God made a duck to go to the biggest piece of water he can find in that part of the country at that given day. And so whether you need it on opening day or not, you're going to eventually need a boat. It just doesn't have to be the fanciest boat out there. And you don't have to be first.
boat manufacturers, you're welcome to.
Yeah. Sorry.
You got to have a boat. I mean, you don't have to, but man, you really limit yourself without one.
Yeah. It really, what I'm getting at is it's easy to get caught up into the idea that you got to have the big fancy super fast boat and you got to race and all that. And I mean, in any given WMA on any given day, the fastest few boats are racing for, one of 2 or 3 or 4 places. There are hundreds of other places in every WMA where a limit can be killed every day, that those good spots can be killed. They're just not the super popular named spots that, everybody talks about. And so if you don't have the fastest boat, just don't get up there with the fastest boats. Let them go and, take your time and find you a spot. It'll make you a better hunter.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to think that way, right? I mean, you look at like any social media platform, especially like when duck season is right around the corner and when it gets here, y'all have seen the videos, I'm sure, of those boat racing. And I mean, it's just, it's easy to think that way. Here's another question that David Huffman. So it says, a lot of opinions on this. So I'd like to know both Brooks and Spence's take. Finishing ducks in the trees, one guy finishes or a team approach? Oh, David asked a good one. You stumped him.
Depends on who I'm hunting with.
Everybody's seen that meme where the guy's got all these numbers flashing up behind him like he's a genius, because there's no right answer to that question.
Right.
Every situation's a little bit different. I would think that depending on where you want the ducks to finish is important, and where you've got your caller at is important. Like if I want the ducks to finish on the south side of the hole, well, I would like to be calling from the south side of the hole, because you're trying to get their attention and lead them to that way. But, you know, like Spence said, when you're early season in the timber and you've got a lot of, you know, cover, everybody can be calling. So every day, every situation's probably a little bit different on, you know, who or how many, you know, are calling to finish them.
Yeah.
I don't like to have more than one person competing to finish them. So if you're hunting with a group of 10 people and all 10 guys can respect the way the other guy's calling and like finish ducks together, I don't think it matters whether it's one person or 10 people. But, you know, sometimes you get lots of personalities and stuff together, and everybody wants to be that guy that, you know, makes the final 3 or 4, you know, clucks to finish them off. And I mean, ultimately what you're trying to do is to get them to finish. And so, and you're trying to respond to what they're doing. So, you know, if everybody approaches it with an open mind and kind of adapts as you see it, sometimes I mean, there's definitely days where you can call them right to the water, and there's days where you need to shut up and let them do it on their own.
Yeah. How are you, like days where you need to calm the water and days where you need to shut up? Are you determining that just strictly off you're out there that day and just watching how the ducks are reacting?
The number one deal I see, if they're coming, my go-to is let them come. And from there you adapt. If they don't finish, if they don't flare, but they just don't quite do it right, and they're coming around again, that's when I change up. I might give them a little more hard feed chatter. I might just go with the subtle and just try to get them there. But once I get them on that final turn and they're coming in, my go-to is just be quiet. But that's the first group, you know, and then from there you adapt. If that doesn't work, then you got to start, you know, changing it up. But literally every day is different.
Yeah, but I'd say just about the exact same thing. I mean, you're just really trying to read what they're doing. I mean, when you stop quacking and you start chattering, and they like bow their wings up harder and they start coming harder, and you continue chattering and they continue coming, like I don't quit doing what I'm doing when they're, you know, when they're doing what I want them to do. I don't stop doing what I'm doing. When they stop doing what I want them to do, I try to change something. So, I mean, it's kind of, you know, it's kind of bumping around in the dark trying to figure out what they want. But when you figure out when they respond the way you want them to, give them more of that until you've found the line, like until that's too much.
Basically letting the ducks dictate how you do it, like watching what they do, and then you go, all right, well, that's what they like. I'm going to do more of that.
And that's one of my pet peeves. If you're calling at ducks, you really need to be looking at them. And so like if I'm calling at a duck, I want to see a reaction. If I'm feed chattering and they're still coming and they're still doing it, well, I'm not going to look away from them and keep doing it. Like you've really got to be zoned in calling at them. So you see all these videos of these folks calling and their heads down at the water and all this stuff. That ain't happening in my group. Like if you're calling, I really want you to be watching. I want you to be tuned in on what you're doing.
Yeah. You just, so I mean, it makes sense because I've seen that too, but it's a different level of, I guess it's a different, like more attention to detail, where it's like, it's not like just these small little details add up and make you more successful. The more things you do, the more looking at the ducks, or if you want them to finish in the south side of the hole, you want to be calling from the south side of the hole, stuff that you don't think about as much until you've done it as much as y'all two have.
It's paying attention. It really is paying attention to the details, just like taking notes. I mean, and it's not that Brooks was born a brilliant duck hunter or that I was born a brilliant duck hunter. It's just that we've wasted a whole lot of time watching what they do and trying to learn. I mean, and over time, they beat you into submission, and you either learn, get better at it and get good at it, or you quit. I mean, it's just it's a war of atrophy, but really, like if you go in the woods every day with an open mind, and turkey hunting's the same way. You go in the woods with an open mind and you try to evaluate at the back and on the back end of it, what happened today and what could we've done different, and you learn from it. And I mean, you'll look up one day and you'll realize, you know what, I killed those ducks today because a couple of years ago, remember when the water, blah, 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 and we knew blah, blah, blah. And like, you'll start put the pieces together and you just, time is just the best fertilizer, if you will, for learning stuff. I mean,
Yeah. No, I thought about something, a gentleman, he was talking about turkey hunting, but the same sentiment applies. He said in turkey hunting, I've screwed up enough hunts that I finally figured out how to screw up less. And I was like,
that's right. I mean,
makes sense. Let's talk about, this is a big one. Let's talk about concealment. Like we've talked about, ducks flaring because because of the decoys. Let's talk about ducks flaring because they saw you. So when it comes to concealment, I guess, like, if you're hunting we'll start out with a I guess just kind of a blanket one. If you're duck hunting in timber, like, what's your go-to camo pattern to wear?
Yeah, I would say I'm wearing it. I like original bottomland better than what I'm wearing, but these are pretty fine clothing. So, I mean, but yeah, mossy oak bottomland, I mean, without a doubt.
Yeah.
There's really not an option if you're hunting timber, in my opinion. Like it's bottomland or nothing.
Right.
And you just show up at the boat ramp and you look around and see who's wearing what. And the folks that know what they're doing, that are coming back to limit the ramp with limits, they're wearing bottomland because that's what you're in. You're in bottomland hardwood timber, and that's what this camo pattern does. It blends in so well in so many environments, but especially in duck hunting in the South. Yeah, it's what it is.
The other thing I would just say about concealment is just, use your camo to an advantage. Stand in the shadows. Your camo blends in a whole lot better in the shadow than it does in the bright sunlight, and use light and the sun and shadows to your advantage whenever you can.
Yeah, for sure. Because no one wants to be that guy that got caught flaring the ducks. No one wants to be that guy. I don't want Brooks to yell at me.
I don't want to yell at you either. Like,
how do y'all? And again, I know that this is a very loaded, far out question, so take it however you want. What's y'all's optimism level for the upcoming season? Are y'all feeling good about it? Or y'all like, man, this could be a good year? Or y'all don't know? Because there's always, especially the past few years, there's been all kinds of discussion about like the Mississippi flyway is not like it used to be, blah, 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 blah. How are y'all feeling about the upcoming year?
I'm the eternal optimist. So this year's going to be the best year ever. I mean, they're ducks. There's so many factors that come into play. Obviously, weather is probably the biggest factor of them all. And, only God knows what's in store for us these next couple of months. But like I said, I feel like this next hunt's going to be the best one ever, always.
I'm torn somewhere between like a hopeless romantic and the eternal optimist, and like also, like the worst, most negative. I think we're never going to see any more mallards again. So I don't know. I'm torn. I mean, I'll be honest. This time of year, the week leading up to opening day of duck season, I'm typically like on the highest of highs, fired up, ready to go. And I'm there. My kids are fired up. And my dad's gonna hunt with us. Like I am jacked up. Having said that, I'm concerned about the number of ducks that we have in the North American flyway, not just the Mississippi flyway, but I'm not an old guy, but I'm 40, almost 41. And I've been going to Canada in the fall since 2006 was the first time that I went up there. Mm-hmm. And it feels like to me that there are a few less every year. that could be habitat dependent, because for a while now I've been kind of going to the same area. And granted, this year was the driest I've ever seen it. But by and large, when I look back, I don't feel like I'm seeing as many ducks, at least in Canada, as I did in years past.
Mhm.
Arkansas, on the other hand, has kind of been a sort of the opposite end of that. I feel like the last couple of seasons we've seen a lot of ducks, a lot of mallards especially. And I think this year, with all of the harsh weather that the upper part of the Midwest has gotten, man, there's a lot of mallards in the state of Arkansas right now relative to what there normally are this time in November. So I'm kind of like a big crock pot that you dumped all the ingredients in and you kind of stirring it around. Like there's a lot of negativity and a lot of just blind hope and optimism all just in there. So you never know what you're going to get. Just got to get up and go.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, right? Regardless of how either of y'all feel like this season is going to go, I doubt it would affect how much y'all actually went. Like y'all are still going to go and try to kill ducks. Like that's not going to stop. Right.
Yeah.
Can't kill them on the couch.
That's right.
Indeed, you cannot.
Historically, really dry summer and fall months have turned into incredibly cold winters. And so, like that weather plays a gigantic factor. And we get really harsh weather, we'll have ducks,
Cold concentrates ducks, just like we're in somewhat of a drought that concentrates ducks on the open water. Well, when you get extreme cold, that open water really shrinks down. So you'll have some folks that will say this year will be the best year they've ever had. And then you'll have some folks that don't adapt, can't find the water, can't do this, just do the same old, and they'll have their worst year ever. So you'll have both ends of the spectrum. But this is really the time to be, like I haven't done a whole lot of travel in the past couple of years, but I've been studying my maps every day. My wife's like, what are you doing? Well, I'm thinking about what are we going to do if they don't do what they've done in the past? Well, I'm not just going to go beating my head up against the wall, not shooting them. I'm going to try to find somewhere to go. I can't go to Canada like Spence every year to stand. I got to get my fill somewhere else.
Baloney.
We're running a little bit low on time, and there's some good questions I got to ask. I don't want to let go. This is going back to back when y'all are talking about either like not getting on the X but getting close to it. So the question is, when you're hunting within range of the X but not on it, in your opinion, what is your best way to pull them to your setup?
Calling.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I would say I would combine calling with wind. I mean, if I know where the X is and I can't be there, I want my plan B to be downwind of that, because the ducks are going to set up into the wind. And so not only do I think about flight lines, I think about a general area that I know they want to be in and where they're going to swing out. And so, I don't want my plan A spot to put the ducks setting up over the best hole in the woods. I like to find spots that are close enough on the flight line, but don't have somebody downwind that can mess me up, whether that's people, tree topping and shooting ducks too high, or whether it's just guys who can call as good or better than we can. So I try to have room downwind of me, so the ducks can set up and finish, the way we want them to.
Gotcha. Again, we're running low on time, so I know we're doing that giveaway. So it's going to be posted in the chat here pretty soon. If y'all make sure y'all keep a look on the Q&A box or the chat box. I can't remember which one it is. Either way, the giveaway is going to happen soon, so keep an eye on that. The last question, save this one best till last because it made me laugh. Someone submitted a question. It said, can you actually call a wood duck? I know how I feel about it, but I'll leave that up to your genius waterfowl mind.
Since Brooks is from Mississippi, I feel like he ought to have to answer this question.
Take it away, Brooks.
I just really hate to burst everybody's bubble that's in Mississippi and South Carolina and North Carolina that have a big wood duck hunt lined up, but no, absolutely not. You cannot call wood duck. If they get close enough and you feel like you got a shot, you probably better take it. Unless you're in the Arkansas woods, that's frowned upon in Arkansas. Don't shoot wood ducks at daylight. We're trying to work big groups of mallards. So if you show up in Arkansas opening weekend, don't be shooting those wood ducks at daylight. But if that's all you're gonna get, yeah, you ain't calling them in there.
Yeah. I used to have, well, we probably all had that friend, but I had a friend in early college that just swore that he was the guy that could call in wood ducks. And we were all just like, no one actually ever believed him because we were like, no, that's not how that works. Then it's not going to happen. So yeah, I think we're going to wrap this up, guys. Thank you, Spence, Brooks. Thank y'all for y'all's time. Thanks for everything that y'all have put out there. Last minute questions coming in. I think we're good. And again, if there's anything that the two of these guys touched on that y'all want to go back and listen to, this will be posted on the onX YouTube channel tomorrow. Hope that y'all enjoyed it. Spence, Brooks, thanks for coming on.
Yep.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.